Thank you very much. So my name is Charles Paumelle. I'm one of the co-founders and the chief product officer at Microshare, which is an IoT solution player which integrates complete solutions for smart buildings. My personal background, I've been involved with IoT for about 4 years now. I joined the LoRa Alliance in 2017 and quite quickly became the chair of their marketing committee. And that gave me a chance to work with the entire ecosystem, from people that make chips to sensors, telecom operators, network suppliers, as well as obviously end-to-end companies like my own.
What was the journey that brought you into IoT to begin with? Was it, did you have a problem that then the technology came from, or were you more from the technology that then found the solutions?
So my whole career has been about bringing together a business outcome and finding the right technology for it. The company that I started with another two co-founders in 2013 is actually our second startup. And the three of us had been previously involved with another company that we sold to Accenture in 2010. When we started Microshare, the whole idea was really around helping people manage data better and basically allowing them to, as the name implies, kind of share that data securely without having to worry about either compliance with certain rules like GDPR, or having to worry about their data getting lost and misused. And so we built this whole idea around data ownership and a framework to allow people to give authorization to specific third parties they wanted to trust with their data based on rules and context. IoT came actually a little bit by accident. We were working with a large carrier in the US for whom we already had a series of other technologies in play with them around this idea of data management. And then when it started launching an IoT network in the US, they actually included us in one of their RFP, which we won, for an application that was initially around bus tracking. And we realized very quickly that even something as simple as tracking a bus for tourist purposes, so I'm a tourist, I've got an app that allows me to see in real time where are the buses. Again, that same data, designed primarily for the consumer, can also be used for lots of other purposes. So now the person in the maintenance yard of the buses has an actual log of how many miles and kilometers each bus has run every day. He can start actually making decisions on which are the ones that he's going to bring into servicing or to change tires based on real information, not just the schedule. And so that was just a very simple example of suddenly, the primary owner of the data was really designed for the consumers to give them information about when's the next bus going to come along. But there's lots of secondary users of that information. And of course, being able to organize that is really, really powerful, and suddenly makes IoT data much more valuable than if it's just for one single purpose.
Yeah, and I love your tagline mission of the Microshare, which is unleash the data, which is a really nice kind of analogy, because you sometimes, until you have the data, you don't know where the power is. You don't know what you don't know.
That's correct.
That's nice.
And one of the other finding that we have done over the last few years, and really exploring this whole IoT ecosystem, is the fragmentation. And I think another reason why this whole idea of unleashing the data, we've come up with what we think about as turnkey IoT solutions. One of the challenges that you have in the IoT ecosystem is that you need lots and lots of different expertise. You need to be really good at sensors. And then the guy who makes the sensor has to have a guy who's really good at radio propagation, because if you put a perfect sensor, but it's got a poor radio design on the board, it's not going to perform very well in the real world. Then you got guys who do security, who do network management, which again is super critical and really you can't bypass. And people like us have really kind of spent their whole lives worrying about compliance and privacy and security more from a granular data level. And then downstream from us, you're gonna have people that are very good at making beautiful dashboards and an integration with the other clients' systems. And all of these things are absolutely essential. None of these you can say, well, I don't really need that piece. And for IoT to have any real life value and a return on investment that clients have made, you have to bring all of these expertises together. And so we've taken I think a pretty good shot at, hiding a lot of that complexity, making it easy for our consumers, which are either big corporates or more and more third-party resellers, but resellers that don't need to understand the intricacies of sensors and connectors and so forth. They just basically they subscribe to a service from us, which is sensing as a service, includes all of that ready-made connectivity and sensors and so forth, and they just tap into an API that gives them meaningful data to obviously enrich either their own company or their clients.
Great, yeah, and making it easy to adopt is extremely difficult.
You're absolutely right, and interesting enough, that was actually one of the lessons that we got very well through an experience we had through the Microsoft for Startups program. So we were selected by Microsoft to be one of the what they call the cohort part a few years ago, and you're absolutely right. That was a lot of the programs we did through Microsoft was really about simplification, both from a technical standpoint, but also more so from a marketing standpoint. Kind of, you're right. Making something simple is really hard, and we were lucky to have some of that support and kind of really get onto that bus. And to a point now that we're able to offer. We've got a catalog of about 20 different turnkey solutions, and we actually even made it simpler from a buying point of view, saying, what, they're all going to have the same price. So we're not having to try and make it hard for clients to know, oh, I don't know exactly how many of these I'm going to need and all that. From a budgeting standpoint, it's pretty much easy. No matter how many solutions you consume from us, you're going to pay the same monthly price.
Nice. And before we get too deep into business models, I'd like to take a kind of step back and kind of just ask you, from your perspective, what does IoT mean?
So in my world, IoT really means having meaningful data about things without having to ask people to go and measure that information. So it's really kind of that automation of the simple things that make our lives a little bit easier. Whether it's knowing that your fridge has valuable medicals in it is not running at the wrong temperature. It's knowing whether something has been left ajar overnight. So it's all those simple things that, of course, someone could visually inspect or record, but just having that information available real time and making that accessible to the right people that need that.
Thanks. And then if we talk about if I'm somebody, I'm a business, exactly that. I'm running. I've got my smart building, or I've got my building and I want it to get smarter. I've got a high maintenance bill and I want to try and do things differently, or I've got a lot of wastage, and I'm wanting to get started in IoT. I'm wanting to invest or internet. What kind of advice would you have for people getting started on that type of project? What type of business that says, okay, I want to get started? What advice do you have for them to consider before they get going?
So I think the first thing I would say, and back to our sort of simplification point of view, is try and look for things that have been done before rather than try and invent new problems to solve. I think we all have maybe an engineering culture of we always want to try and find the hardest problems to solve. But one of the real insights we found over the years is that there were actually a lot of things that could be solved with the same core components, and obviously adapt them, but not having to start from a blank page was a really critical part of being able to get started fast and learn and get some returns. So that would probably be my first thing is, definitely don't, if you're looking for something to carry, try and find a wheel. Don't start and inventing something from scratch. And of course, the second one is, the market is definitely maturing. We, even from the few years that we've been in it, we can see the difference between, people that were just literally selling, they were selling a camshaft, but clients wanted a car. And someone else was selling tires, and someone else was selling brakes, but no one's kind of thinking, hang on, I'm going to put all these things together and provide transportation. Because actually, people don't even want a car. They really want something to go from A to B. And actually, that's, you could take it to the next level. That's why, a lot of younger people maybe don't have a car. They're just using Uber because they are literally buying a transportation service. So that, I think that's certainly another advice I would look at, is make sure that you look, at people that think about your problem holistically, that are not trying to, come up with something that's brand new every single time, because the reality is most things can be solved using existing paths. And you may need a slightly different type of transportation depending on how far you want to drive, or how many people you want to carry. But essentially, everyone needs that sort of basic idea of something that has an engine and four wheels and can move along.
Cool. And then you touched on the fact that you're using sensing as a service as the underlying part of a business model. A lot of people are struggling to find the right business model for their IoT service or product, and actually moving more towards services might be a way forward. Because you're a chief product officer, I thought I'd ask this question specifically about what do you see being the key kind of components of a sensing as a service and monitoring as a service kind of business model?
So I think the first thing to think about from a sensing as a service business model is to always start with the outcome. Don't start with the kit you have, but think about what is driving a client to wake up one day saying, I am ready to subscribe to X as a service, whether it's occupancy for my desk and my meeting rooms, or temperature monitoring for the fridge across my estate, or knowing where my assets are in real time. What's the outcome that people are looking for, and obviously the associated business driver. I do whole talks about the fact that none of the IT technology matters until we have an actual specific return that is relevant in the client's world. Because of course, someone might go and buy a proof of concept and try out for 50 sensors. That's not going to make anyone's business. And we could all then waste a lot of time doing these things when it was not clear from the beginning what was the real outcome the client was looking for, what is going to move their own business forward, that they are going to say, you know what, I want to have this, I want to have hundreds, thousands, or millions of these, because it is suddenly changing the way my business operates. So start with that piece, and then work backwards. What are the various components that you're going to need? Again, like any other IoT solution, you're going to need some sensors, you're going to need some connectivity, some application that kind of takes that data and makes it into a meaningful format that the client can consume. And obviously, there's a whole aspect that people kind of overlook a little bit in my experience, which is all around integration with clients' existing systems, around change management, because we're introducing a whole bunch of new devices from an installation point of view, which again we've made a lot of work ourselves to make self-install a reality, and it can be done. But of course, you have to appreciate that it's going to be something that most people have not experienced themselves. So you got to think about the whole of those aspects around, project and change management, as well as embedding that into kind of everyday processes. That's when you start getting real fuel in the engine. That's when you start saying, not doing proof of concept for 50, but literally rolling out tens or hundreds of thousands of devices. And we're fortunate that we started crossing that chasm. And one of the ways we've done that is really by taking away, from a client's point of view, all of that complexity, and just saying, here's a few euros a month that gives you that data set. Let us worry about how we get that data.
Yeah, nice. And then if we kind of take a bit of another step to the side and get a bit more human in this, about what are we doing it all for? So if I say, Charles, what does success mean to you? How would you answer that?
So I think for me, success looks like having done something that is meaningful to help people live better, whether it's using less energy, whether it's living longer in their homes. So we have some clients that use our technology to help people that have maybe less mobility and so forth have a enough support remotely. And so it's really that little piece of changing a little bit of the world to live in a better place is what I would think of as success.
Well, thank you. And then just because we've got time, I'm going to ask you a question specifically about the COVID or the Corona situation and how that's affected kind of some of the work and projects that you're doing and your ability to kind of help in that situation. Just if there's anything you want to say on that.
Sure. So we've really had two sides to the crisis with coronavirus for our business. The first is that some of the massive projects we had won just before the lockdowns started in various countries literally just stopped overnight. We had pending orders for millions of sensors for especially corporate real estate. So we do a lot of desk occupancy and meeting rooms and air quality monitoring in offices. That literally stopped happening overnight. We got a couple of clients that are restarting actually in preparation for going back to work. But the big projects we had won, we kind of lost. And hopefully they'll come back some point, but who knows? We were fortunate that we got contacted by a large pharma to help them with what turned out to be a contact tracing project for one of their factories in Malaysia. And that turned into a bit of a success story overnight because we got picked up by the Financial Times. We actually made a front page of the Financial Times in the UK, which is a big business newspaper. And that just gave us suddenly this little tiny 30-odd people company out of the US and the UK. We are literally being contacted by every major corporation across the world. Everyone suddenly wants to resell our services, which is great because that's the path we're on anyway. But we've never obviously had such a busy pipeline of people coming to say, I'd love to understand how your solution works and what it does. And actually, we realized that obviously contact tracing being very important, but was a great lever for us to talk about the other solutions we have, which are related to keeping infection at bay, whether it's cleaning of toilets better, whether it's monitoring the occupancy so that you are respecting the social distancing rules, whether it's we've invented something called touch-free feedback, which again is a nice and easy way to allow employers to monitor the wellness of their employees using simple QR codes and things like that. So that's actually in retrospect, and I love there's a side of me that hates an idea that we could be seen as profiteering from it. It's been a big change. So a lot of the business that we had going and that was gonna happen this year completely went away. We found ourselves fortunate enough to be at the right place at the right time and able to kind of turn one of our solutions that was historically used for asset zoning, so knowing how many wheelchairs or bed I have in a hospital, repurpose it for that contact tracing, which meant that we didn't have a long lead time from a procurement of hardware or anything like that. We just had to make some changes to the software. And that's been, again, one of the reasons we're able to go to market so quickly on that.
Yeah, and I wouldn't ever see it as profiteering. I would see it as a lot of hard work that you've done in the background, and just all of a sudden there's a huge spotlight on that problem, which maybe wasn't shown before, and all of a sudden that spotlight falls on you. So it's one of those overnight successes that took 15 years.
You're absolutely right.
Right time.
And we often describe what we're going through right now very much like anyone who's experienced what the post 9/11 was in the US. So the experience of traveling over there, it wasn't quite as apparent in Europe, but it's certainly over there completely transformed overnight. Airports had to suddenly put all of that security barriers and those measures, the additional piece staff and everything. That just had to happen. And in the first few months and even years after that event, people didn't necessarily know what and how they were going to do. They knew they had to do something different. They knew they had to find the budget that didn't exist the year before to cater for all that security, because that was a new reality. And we're seeing a lot of what we're doing right now in kind of falling to that camp. People know they're going to have to do something different, and they're kind of getting their head around what does that look like. And funny enough, I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think a lot of the IoT, remote maintenance and predictive maintenance and all that, the idea of having, sensors that just log data for you and tell you when something is wrong, rather than having to send someone manually to inspect that asset or whatever, suddenly makes even more sense when most of your staff is locked at home. And you can still keep an eye on things without having to be there. That suddenly sounds like a really good proposition.
Yeah, it does. So I think we'll leave it there on such a high note.